So, as I think a lot of modern people do these days, I consume a lot of media. And what I mean by media is stuff like movies, TV, music, even, podcasts and YouTube and streams. But of all of the forms, more forms of entertainment than media, but of all of the forms of entertainment, the number one form of entertainment will always be, to me, music. I have identified with music. I have loved music. It has been a huge part of who I am and my life literally as long as I can remember. My earliest memories include listening to music, and I have grown a significant degree in my musical taste. I think it's been a pretty significant degree, and I love live music and things of that nature. There's just something really, really special about it. Growing up, there were really two fundamental genres that I think have kind of helped form my taste in music. And I'll say right now, as someone who enjoys music, as someone who consumes a significant amount of music, I mean, every year on my Spotify recap, I think I'm usually over 100,000 minutes of music listened to. So, I mean, I spend most of my day listening to music. I'm not going to consider myself one of these people that's like a musical expert. When I say I love music, I love listening to music, I love consuming music. I am by no means a music critic. I know I listen to some music that some people might not like. I think that, in my opinion, everybody has things that they enjoy. And if those things make you happy, that's all that should matter. As long as it's not hurting anybody, that's all that should matter. And I think music is a huge example of this, because I think a lot of people a lot of people who really enjoy music tend to kind of isolate into what they think this is the best genre of music. This is the most important genre of music, or music that follows this path, or certain styles of music or certain bands. It's like, listen to whatever you want to listen to. There's songs and artists across the board that I listen to and I love, and it's something I really want to bring that passion into this podcast. And I want to talk a lot about music on here. It's not going to be exclusively music, but I do want to incorporate that more because I realize that music is a huge part of my life, and I want to help share that with other people, just kind of let other people experience what I enjoy. Because that's one of my favorite things to listen to people talk about is their taste in music. Even if I don't agree with it, just seeing people's passion for music, to me, is the most incredible part about being a fan of music. Now, I say all that just to preface the rest of this podcast and the other episode I talk about music. I listen to what I listen to because I enjoy it. You might not agree with it, but I want everybody, one of the things I want to do is tell everybody to kind of keep an open mind when it comes to music, because, as long as it's making people happy, that's all that matters. And there's some people that might listen to me talk about music and think my taste is absolute garbage. There's some people that might like it, but my hope is just to kind of spread my love for music out to the world a little bit. This is Anecdotal Madness. My name is Chris. I am your host. This is a podcast where I talk about anything and everything from the dry heat of my back porch. Last episode, I commented on the heat. It's hotter today than it was last episode when I recorded last episode, but the humidity's down. The humidity's way down, so it's not quite as bad when I'm sitting out here and enjoying this nice lunch break. So anyway, I wanted to talk about music on this episode. It's kind of an establishing episode where I go into it, because this is probably going to wind up being a recurring theme on this podcast, is just talking about music. Because like I said, I love music, and I really want to help spread the kind of music I love, because my taste is a little bit all over the place. Like, I've got stuff I definitely like more than other stuff. I've got stuff that I don't really care for all that much, but I want to open a discussion, with the audience, share my kind of music with everybody else, and see if anybody else wants to share some music back with me, and just share the love with it. That's all this is about. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my background and what my foundation in music is. And as I said in the open, I know there's certain bands and songs and stuff I listen to, and one of the most prominent bands I think I'm gonna try and talk about, hopefully I have time to talk about today, I know is not necessarily divisive. I think it's more divisive in the community it exists within. But anyway, going back even before that, my earliest memories even being alive involve listening to music. And I was raised as an only child, and my parents are both older. They were in their early 40s when they had me. And so I was raised on two genres of music. With my mom, it was always classic country, like Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Hank Williams, not Hank Williams Jr., Hank Williams, that old outlaw country, the classic sound of country music, especially Johnny Cash. I love Johnny. To this day, I still love Johnny Cash. I have a huge respect for him as an artist. I think he deserves every ounce of credit that he's got. He's an incredibly talented artist, and I still listen to a lot of this music. And I think that was very, very fundamental in a lot of my musical taste. And then kind of on the opposite side, on the other side of that spectrum, I spent a lot of time with my dad listening to classic rock and classic metal, AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Motorhead, Black Sabbath, just all these incredible bands from the 70s. Really, this era of music between this classic country and classic rock from like 1960 to the early 1990s. And that's kind of the world that I existed in musically for most of my formative years. I mean, really up until high school, I would argue that 90% of the music that I listened to during this time, and I mean, this was also, I was raised in kind of a smaller town. I wasn't really exposed to a lot of other music outside of these genres. So that's the main thing that I listened to. And I kind of had a little bit of a turning point in high school. I think it was my sophomore year. I'm going to say it was my sophomore year. I'm pretty sure it was my sophomore year. I took a music appreciation class. It was a required class. And looking back, I don't think that there was a ton that was like world opening or eye opening in this class for most people, because I feel like most of the people that I went to high school with were probably fairly exposed to other kinds of music. My friend group that I had, we all had kind of similar tastes in music, so I hadn't really expanded out that much. So in my sophomore junior year, I took this class. And it was really the first time I was namely exposed to just outside music and outside ideas about music. Because for a long time, it wasn't that I didn't like other types of music or didn't know to look for it. It's like I didn't, because I never thought to look for these other genres of music. I'd been listening to the same music pretty much my whole life. This really, really opened up my eyes. And I started kind of exploring out a little bit, mostly going into a lot of kind of newer rock around that time. It was kind of it was just outside of the post-grunge era. So I started kind of getting in with some of those bands, like Seether was a big one. I still to this day, I love Seether. Linkin Park, a lot of bands of that nature. I spent a lot of time listening to after that in high school. And I started kind of getting into not necessarily what I would say is like darker, but kind of more heavier stuff a little bit in that era. I had one friend that was really, really into Slipknot, and at the time I just couldn't. It was in my infancy of listening to heavier music, and I hadn't really gone that far down that rabbit hole. It really wasn't for me at the time. And in 2015, a little while after I'd gotten out of high school, I found an album that released in August of that year. And that album completely changed my entire musical taste. That album was Meliora by the band Ghost. And that album, to this day, is probably in my top 5 albums of all time, if only for just the incredible, just the change in perspective it gave me on music and really helped usher me towards the metal community, which I now metal music is one of my absolutely favorite genres. Whether or not Ghost is metal, if you've ever heard them, that's entirely up for debate. Personally, these days, I see Ghost as kind of a harder rock band than a metal band, but especially in this era. To tell you guys a little bit about Ghost, basically the idea behind the band is for a long time, nobody knew who they were. They were one of these bands where everybody was behind a mask, which I love that concept, by the way. Absolutely love it. And I'll talk about that more in detail later. But they were all in masks at the time, and this is before any of the identities for any of these guys had come out, which was really, really cool to me. And their whole shtick is kind of like they are the lead for the band is the satanic anti-pope. And their whole shtick is it's basically a devil church. And in 2016 or 2017, one of the two, I actually got to see them live in concert. They opened for Iron Maiden, and that was one of the best concerts I've ever been to in my entire life. It was really before they changed directions, because they have changed direction a little bit, and I like the direction they're in right now, but it was back in this early era where they were just dark, and something about that, I don't know if it was just, me in my late teens, early 20s or what, but it's really spoke to me, and it was just something clicked in that moment, and I was like, I love this music. Squarehammer was the first song I ever listened to on that album. I immediately listened to the whole thing. I bought it on vinyl. It's something about that whole album just grabbed me, and ever since then I've been a huge fan of them. And the whole idea behind the whole reason I wanted to do this episode is that my wife and I actually went this last weekend. They released a live concert movie right here, right now, of their latest tour, which we actually got rained out of. We were supposed to see them with Amon Amarth, and we got rained out. We didn't get to go see them. The concert got canceled. We did get to see Amon Amarth play 3 songs in the pouring rain, which is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. But, we'll talk about that later. So I think one of the big reasons that I had really fallen in with Ghost, to me, especially as, I was raised in the rural South in a Southern Baptist household, and just seeing something like this at a time where I was just in my kind of formative adult years, after being raised what I would consider somewhat innocent, it was just such a shock, and something drew me in so much about it that it completely changed my taste in music almost overnight. And in a good way. I'm super glad it did, because it opened me to not only an entirely different world of sound for music, but an entirely different group of people. And honestly, the metal community, if you're not involved in the metal community at all, let me be the first person to tell you, the metal community is the nicest, most amazing group of people that you will ever meet on this earth. Do not let the dark and doom and gloom fool you at all. I have never once been to a metal show. I've never once been in a mosh pit. I've never been in the middle of any of that and not just felt this incredible sense of community and this incredible sense of just awesome people gathered together. And it's just, the more I dove into that community, and the more, the first kind of heavier metal concert I went to was that Iron Maiden concert with Ghost. And that just opened me up to this entirely new world. And since then, I have gone down so many rabbit holes when it comes to musical exploration. And I've got a dozen different roads that I can branch off for in terms of music, because this album not only threw me down the path of just the awesome world of metal music, but it also really opened my eyes to, for the first major time, even outside the music appreciation classes, the first time I sat down and was like, there's genres outside of what I'm used to listening to that are really good. And, I've spent my whole life up until now being told that this is stuff you shouldn't listen to, this is bad, and nobody would ever explain why. And it's like, this is just awesome music. And then once I got involved with the community, once I, started going to those concerts, it's just so hard to stop. It's so hard not to want to be involved. And again, I 100% understand, like, Ghost is not for everybody. I would very much hesitate to describe it as heavy. Like I said, I would consider it to be definitely a heavier rock band. I think a lot of the themes are a little bit heavier. I think the music itself, as someone who, I listen to a lot of, black metal and death metal now, stuff where you can't understand what the people are saying for the first few times you listen to it. It's definitely not the heaviest metal. And I've heard it described as, the best way I think I've ever heard it described is like satanic Scooby-Doo chase music. And that's a good way to put it. It is kind of, there's some of it that is kind of goofy. I really I think one of my favorite parts about the band, and this is something that still resonates with me today about a lot of similar shticks, is I really liked the whole hidden identity thing. And I still love this. There's another artist that does it that I really like called Sleep Token. And Sleep Token is definitely heavier than Ghost, in my opinion. Also very good music. Definitely recommend you check them out. They just put out a new album last year. Take Me Back to Eden, I believe was the name of it. Really good album. Love that album. But again, kind of in that same vein, and kind of something that later on, after I kind of started getting more into metal, drew me into Slipknot a little bit. Just the idea of these artists who are putting the music and the performance and the art form ahead of who they are. Something about that really, really draws me in, because I am, and I kind of started talking about this earlier in the episode, I'm not a super musically proficient person. I've tried to play guitar a few times. I can kind of play guitar. I can't hold the pitch. I can't sing. I don't know all the ins and outs of the music world. I can't, there's some things I can talk about. There's some things I can't. But one thing that drives me bonkers, drives me absolutely insane, is if a band has any kind of lineup change, new guitarist, new vocalist, I can see a lot of the times, because there are a couple of vocalist changes that have thrown me through a loop, but new guitarist, new drummer, anything like that, people are like, I can't listen to this anymore. It's horrible. It's so much worse. I've listened to Ghost now for going on 10 years. I could not tell you if there have been 10, 15, 20, 30 different drummers in that band. They could have a new drummer every night. I could not tell you the difference between the drums on the albums. I couldn't tell you the difference between any of the guitar. Everybody is hiding behind a mask. Everybody is dressed in black from head to toe at every one of their shows. The only person that we know definitively is lead singer Tobias Forge. And I have an immense respect for Tobias and what he's done with the band. Every album has sounded a little bit different than the last. I love that. Even though the newer albums of Ghost are definitely a lot lighter than they used to be in both tone and music, I still love it, and I love the artistic vision. I love just that. That's what draws me into the music, is the performance, seeing them live. I've seen them live back when they were a little darker, and I've seen them live when they're lighter. The performance in both cases was fantastic. I go for the art. I go for the music. I listen to these bands for the art and the music and the fact that I can close my eyes and just go somewhere else for a little while. That's why I listen to music. I don't listen to this stuff because, I'm so enthralled with the drumming of so-and-so. I'm so involved with the guitar tones of so-and-so. I listen to this music because I put it on and I can jump through 4 different albums and I can love every song that I listen to. That for me is the big thing with music. I don't want to focus on the people. In the bands that don't focus on the people and focus purely on the art form, I just think they take it to such another level. And I think that's one of those things that really just drew me into Ghost, because it was one of those first experiences I had with something like that. Because like I said, I kind of lightly got into Slipknot around high school, but that was well after their identities had come out. And there are several other artists that kind of do this same thing these days. Like I said, the biggest one I can think of off the top of my head is Sleep Token. But I love this form of artistry so much. It's just, like I said, the intense focus on the art form and the performance over, look at our drummer. I keep pointing back to the drummer because I listen to a little bit more Slipknot now, and people always wig out. They've been through 3 drummers now with Jay Weinberg and Joey Jordison, and there's a new gentleman whose name I can't remember. Every time they change drummers, people wig out and say, oh, it's so much, Jay's drumming was just never on par with Joey's. And it's like, honest to God, I've seen them perform live. I never saw Joey perform live, but I've seen Jay perform live. He puts a hell of a show on, and I've listened to all of the albums. To me, it all sounds excellent. I don't want to get caught up on that stuff. I just care about the fact that I am enjoying the music. And that's, if I can get that out of any musical experience, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be happy. Alrighty, as usual, we're getting to time here, so I'm going to start to wrap this up a little bit, but not before I introduce a new segment. I'm doing a new segment on this episode, and every episode going forward in the outros. I want to bring something back that I used to do on Weird Man White Van, which is a show we used to have on Go Bicker. It's called Chris's Music Corner, where I sit down and I try and introduce the audience to new music or just talk about a little bit what music I'm listening to. So I'm going to do this every week. In the outro bit, I'm going to include a song and an artist that I have been listening to this week and why you should check them out and listen to this song and this artist. And this week's is going to be Misery by Memphis May Fire. This is actually a band that I just found this week. I found them on Instagram, ironically. I was scrolling through and I saw a video of the lead singer, and I'm sorry I don't have his name, but I saw it was just an isolated vocal track from this song. Dude's an incredible singer. I think the band does a really, really good job of crossing over kind of heavy metal almost. It reminds me of Linkin Park a lot, honestly. And they did do a cover of, I think it was Numb, that's pretty good. It wasn't Numb, it was Faint. They did a cover of Linkin Park's faint. And I think it's kind of got that similar vibe to it. They blend a lot of electronic and heavier metal with heavier instruments with heavier vocals. And I really, really like that. It's a great song. It's a great band. Been listening to them a ton this week. Highly, highly recommend checking them out. Anyway, that's it for Anecdotal Madness this week. As always, thank you guys so much for showing up and listening to this. If you enjoyed this, you might enjoy some of our other podcasts. Check us out. We're online at stuckontheinternet.com, or you can follow us on social media. We have an Instagram and a Twitter, both Stuck on Internet. We have a YouTube channel that is Stuck on the Internet, and we have a subreddit r/Stuck on the Internet. And you can find us wherever you find podcasts. Thanks so much for listening this week, guys.